What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Celtics Talk Weekly postgame show. The Boston Celtics moved to 13-4 on the season with a huge home win over the Atlanta Hawks, 113 to 103. Your final score. I'm your host, Seamus Zarlingo. Next to me, over here, no, over there. I pulled a
Yep,
Rob. I
you
pulled a
moved
Rob.
me.
I went over here. You're over there. You're right over here. With me, alongside me, Franco. That is Franco. That is alongside me tonight here for tonight's post game show. Franco, as I put an emphasis on your real last name, Franco, everybody, not Franco, Franco. Franco, your thoughts on tonight's Celtics win over Atlanta?
Necessary when going into the postseason or in-season tournament on Tuesday. Team came off two straight rough losses, and they were without their two key additions for the season. So we got to see more of a 2022 type roster with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum leading the way in scoring. I love the way that the team was able to spread the ball around tonight. They were dominant on the defensive end, out rebounding the Hawks, getting 15 more rebounds than the Hawks. And when this team is utilizing plays and moving around without the ball in their hands and not just watching Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown create their own shot, that is when this team is doing its best work. And that was on prime example tonight. You had Hauser moving around from three, Neemias Queta, who stepped up huge tonight and finally saw some minutes that were deserved, put on some big work on the defensive end, rebounding, got 10 rebounds tonight, 7 points, 3 of 8 from the field, which over time, as he gets more looks and comfortable in this offense, I'm sure that percentage will go up and we'll start seeing double doubles from him. And I think what the bench showed tonight was what this team was missing the past couple games, and also Joe Mazzulla corrected a lot of mistakes that were troublesome in the last few games.
Yeah, I believe tonight's win, it was a little bit of a weird game throughout because the Celtics, it's so weird sitting here as Celtics fans. We do nitpick this really great basketball team at the end of the day. They are a great basketball team. We nitpick them a lot. And when they do have bad performances like the other night in Orlando, we like to go very in depth and really dissect what is very wrong with the team. And even tonight, we can dissect this game and pick out some things about the team that weren't all that great. But then you look at, of course, as I bring up now, the lead tracker tonight up on the screen. I mean, just like the other night, the Celtics, it, they pretty much lead throughout the game. Now, the other night in Orlando, we saw a much different result at the end of the game, and the Celtics, they were not able to sustain the Orlando run in the third. But you see, the Atlanta Hawks, they went on that third quarter run as well, but they just weren't able to get over the hump the same way Orlando did on Friday, that is. And you just look at the lead tracker for this game. It's great that the Celtics pretty much led wire to wire. I'm not really seeing an area in there in which the Atlanta Hawks ever led. Yeah, I mean their biggest lead times tied zero, lead changes zero. Atlanta's biggest lead zero. So, it's a little hard, looking at it from other teams' perspectives, right? It's a little hard to nitpick the Celtics too hard because of how this looks. The Celtics never extinguished the lead in this game, which is great, and it's a step in the right direction. However, you do see those little periods of time in between where you have a period in the middle of the first quarter, right at the beginning of the second quarter, and right there towards the end of the third quarter, in which the Celtics never quite recovered from. but sort of resurmounted the lead enough to pull out the win. You do have these moments in the game for the Celtics and in games, just in total for the Celtics. You have these moments where the team just lets the other team pick them apart entirely. And I believe a lot of it is due to their defensive effort, who's out on the floor. And offensively, I think the team looks fine most of the time. And we do think a lot of the times, philosophically, the Celtics, it's more of the fact, they might need to be passing to another shot. They need to be taking more shots at the rim, but ultimately they do generate quality shots offensively. However, defensively, sometimes it's looked like a mess. It's looked like an absolute mess. And I do believe that's what's causing some of these runs. But although the Celtics led throughout this game, I would like to see this lead tracker be a little bit more consistent than we've seen it, and not in a consistently bad way in which we see teams coming back. But does anything stand out to you about this lead tracker and how the game went for the Celtics overall tonight?
It's very easy for us to nitpick the team looking at this graphic, or just being Celtics fans for the past 4 years or so, because when it comes down to the third quarter, that is when this team has just been extinguished consistently when it matters the most. And I feel like we all have a little PTSD pitter patter in our hearts from that. But other than the strong performances throughout the second quarter, when this team makes their adjustments and is getting the ball around to everyone, Jason Tatum taking his 25 shots per game, and it's more on the better side. And the team was also bringing the ball to the hoop off of transition a lot tonight.
Yeah, and to me, it's really just that dip there in the third quarter for me. The Celtics, they just need to sustain their biggest leads. It's their biggest leads in particular. That is what has me now. It just drives me crazy. It really drives me crazy because this team is 13-4 right now. Okay, they're 13-4, which is a great record. It's a tremendous record, right? We're the best team in the NBA, I believe, record wise right now, if I'm not mistaken. So this team is great. That being said, you've seen two games in a row now. The team establishes their biggest lead of the game, and all of a sudden, that dip right there, that's a 6 point game. That's a 6 point game right there. And it could have easily gone the other way like it did in Orlando the other night. And thankfully, that's really what we should be praising about this game, is the fact the team was able to withstand that. However, you just don't want to see those type of runs in particular. Basketball is a game of runs, and the Celtics are going to lose leads over time. They're going to see leads diminish. They're going to build leads over time. However, you don't want to see this trend of the Celtics grabbing their biggest lead of the game and then pretty much giving it all back to Atlanta right away, the same way they did the other night in Orlando. And like I said, we are nitpicking this team a lot because they are 13-4 when we're at the end of this discussion. But the fact that we see that dip in there, it's just a little discomforting, I would say, for me, in some regard. But that being said, the Celtics did do their job tonight, and I did think they played well throughout a lot of this game. Atlanta was just really no match defensively for the team. Like I said, the Celtics are still very elite offensively as a unit, and I think defensively they've gone a little bit like this. Offensively too, they've gone a little bit like this in the last couple of games. But I still think they're an elite offensive unit. And tonight, I thought Joe Mazzulla showed a little bit tonight in adjustment that Atlanta, the scouting reporter on Atlanta, is the fact they don't cover any cuts to the rim. They don't cover any cuts to the rim, and rotation wise, they're a complete mess. And I believe the Celtics were able to take advantage of that, especially in the first half, especially in the first quarter. That is a thing about this team you do have to feel good about, is the fact they do get off to these really hot starts. It's really just about maintaining those hot starts over time, but they do get off to those hot starts. And we saw it again tonight. Atlanta, a lot of back cuts to the rim, a lot of big guys. You mentioned Keita played a pretty all right game for. I mean, honestly, looking at his entire NBA career, it's probably one of his better NBA games of his career. Although he did start out 1 of 5, he finished the game quite well. There were a couple of moments in which he was just putting his big body around the rim and not being covered, and it kind of seemed as if Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum were missing him in certain moments, and guys who had the ball were missing him in certain moments. But you did see those opportunities for the Celtics as a team overall, not just Keita early on, those early opportunities by the rim, those cuts to the rim in which collapsed the defense, got easy looks for the Celtics right there at the bucket, one of the most efficient, if not the efficient shot in basketball. And it's nice to see the Celtics were able to take advantage of that early on. And somebody who I thought was crucial in that aspect of the game tonight, our player of the game. And this one, again, maybe, I don't want to say it, folks. I don't want to say it. It might be a little bit controversial because somebody named Jason Tatum scoring 34, and it's not him. It's Derek White tonight. Derek White, 15 points. You see not 11 rebounds. Oh my goodness, folks. That is a mistake. Not 11 rebounds. He had 11 assists tonight. That's why he was so big in this game and initiating the offense for the Celtics. Derek White, that is just a straight up graphic mistake right there. He had
4 rebounds
11
tonight.
assists, 11 assists on the night, 4 rebounds, and also 5 of 13 from the floor. And I thought what ultimately was impressive about this game for Derek White is the fact he shot 0-6 from 3, which typically in games, we saw 2 years ago and even last year where games or worse or around that mark from 3 in, the Celtics typically weren't very good in, and he was very ineffective. However, tonight we see, I wish we could see on the screen right now that he had 11 assists, although it does say 11 rebounds, he had 11 assists. I must emphasize again, he had 11 assists, was extremely effective, and even his scoring numbers, I'm very impressed by Derek White's ability to put up points in other ways when he is not shooting the ball well, which we know all NBA players, they're not going to shoot the ball well every single night. And Derek White was already kind of a streaky shooter on his career already. And the fact that he had one of those nights, 0-6 from 3, 5 of 13 from the field, not the most efficient, but still was able to put up 15 points and, of course, pass to 11 assists. That is something that the Celtics, that is something very valuable to the Celtics. And I think, too, with Derek White this year, his free throw attempts, you look at today's game, 5 of 5 from the free throw line. I think his ability to get to the free throw line is very underrated. Those are straight, easy points for any basketball team to attain. That's why we want this Celtics team to go to the rim more and more and more, simply because they can draw more fouls, get themselves to the free throw line more often, and get themselves more easy points. Derek White came up with 5 of those easy points tonight on a night in which he wasn't shooting all that well. And that's why I have him as the player of the game. But what did you see, Franco, out of Derek White tonight, our player of the game?
Derek White stepped up huge with Giroux's absence. Tonight they started Delano Banton, which I wasn't really expecting from them, and I haven't seen that in their starting rotations yet because he's usually at the lower than Hauser per se or Pritchard on the lineup, but I liked him starting alongside Derek White, and Derek White was able to succeed from the field. The only shots he missed tonight were really the 3-pointers, and he was efficient everywhere else. Also stepped up huge against DeJounte Murray and Trae Young, which Trae Young was not too consistent from the field tonight, but he still put up 31, I believe. Yeah, so I know that Derek White is going to be a key factor in any of these team wins going down the stretch, and we know how valuable he's going to be when it comes down to playoff time. Quick ticker fix.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not even sure. Are we? I'm quite certain too that we're just in an array of typos right now. The graphic that just came up at the bottom was spelled wrong as well. Assists might be spelled in a different way, folks. But yes, I'm going to emphasize again, 11 assists for Derek White tonight, our player of the game. That was we will in time get better with the graphics that pop up on screen, like even right now.
Once again, shout out to Justin and Rob.
Dude, yes, Justin and Rob, the fact that they make graphics, they just sit here and they're like this, and they just like they look at the camera, and then the graphics just pop up, and I'm over here like, oh my goodness, I need everything to pop up. I mean, it's not the same. Everything is a little bit more hectic. I will say, they're like veterans though. They're like Brown and Tatum. I'm like, you know, I don't know what rookie or am I Jordan Walsh? Am I really in the G League? Like Jordan Walsh hasn't even got his chance yet. But I don't know. I feel like I'm running a little bit more than Jordan Walsh. But he was active tonight for the Celtics. Just got called up from Maine. Somebody the Celtics might be a little bit excited about going into the future, although the impact immediately might not be there. But we'll see with Jordan Walsh. As for other forwards on the Celtics, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Tonight, Jason Tatum, 34 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 11 of 25 from the field, 5 of 13 from the floor, and 7 of 10. Like I mentioned earlier with the free throw attempts, Jason Tatum, 10 free throw attempts tonight. Now, missing 3 of those is not ideal, I will say, but the fact that he got to the line 10 times is something that certainly gives you optimism. What did you see out of Jason Tatum tonight, Franco?
The energy shifter. It's that's his role, and that dunk on Capella tonight was huge. He just is one of the. If he's going, they're going. That's how it needs to be for the rest of the season. Jason Tatum, yes, he can light them up from the field, but who's going to really set the pace? It's going to be Jaylen Brown, who's that second, that left, not the left hand to Jaylen or Jason Tatum, more like the right, but he's going to really help out this team a lot if he just continues to play the way he is. I want him to pick it up more on the defensive end. His hustle is there on the transitions, but other than that, I don't see him really taking up the best player on the court, which tonight would have been Trae Young. I would have loved to see him switched on to him a couple more times and not letting Trae Young get that open screen, going under the screen, wide open three-pointer, which he's a glitch, and he's going to make those shots that are going to be challenging to block, or he's going to get those situations where somehow the ball hits the rim and now he's shooting 2 at the line. But other than that, his performance tonight was what was expected, shooting 20 shots tonight and reasonably making around 50% of them. That's an ideal performance from Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, and going back on Jason Tatum, I thought this could have been one of those Jason Tatum games, like we saw in Charlotte the other night. He didn't quite go as insane in the second half as we thought potentially, because he did have 21 points at halftime, and he did score 13 points in the second half, which isn't nothing to sneeze at necessarily. But he ended the game with 34, and it felt like this could have been one of those nights for Jason Tatum. He ended the game with 6 turnovers. Now that is something for certain that the Celtics, Jason Tatum, everybody wants to see him clean up, because the turnovers from him and Brown specifically over time, and we can get to that with Brown in a second here. He only had 2 turnovers tonight, but particularly with Jason Tatum against the Hawks, 6 turnovers. That's something the Celtics want to clean up. That's something Jason Tatum wants to clean up, and some of those turnovers, where they were just bad turnovers. They were turnovers, they're effort turnovers. They're turnovers in which Jason Tatum, if he puts an extra zing on the ball, or thinks for another second, it doesn't make the pass, fakes a pass, makes a pass elsewhere, that's going to be a better decision, takes away another opportunity for the Atlanta Hawks. And tonight, the Celtics came away, they had more field goal attempts than the Atlanta Hawks, but just some of those turnovers, if the Celtics don't turn the ball over as much, this could have been a much wider margin than 10 points at the end of the night. And I do want to mention, too, the Celtics held the Atlanta Hawks, I believe they mentioned on the broadcast, to a season low 103 points. So before this game, I don't believe they had been held to under 108. Is that correct? Or 110 or 108? And they scored 103 tonight. So Atlanta, Celtics defensively there looked pretty good. But as for Jason Tatum as a whole and the turnovers, all around, I thought Jason Tatum was phenomenal tonight outside of the turnovers. That's what just makes this, not frustrating. I don't want to say it's a frustrating performance, but it's one of those performances that it looks very, very good on the surface, but you just know intricately that it could have been a lot better if, the ball was taken care of and a couple of free throws went in, a couple more attempts maybe taken from better spots than they were. But all around, Jason Tatum was phenomenal. They put pressure on the defense, both him and Brown. And we'll bring up Brown here on the bottom as well. Both him and Jaylen Brown, I thought, put a lot of pressure on the Hawks defense, specifically early in this game. And I thought they did a good job of, maybe not so much defensively, but offensively setting the tone in this one, just getting to the rim, being physical, and just setting that environment up for the whole offense to take hold and do that, because we saw a lot of other guys be aggressive as well. Banton, I thought, was particularly aggressive as a starter. He's not exactly the most, equipped player in the world with the starters. However, I thought he was fairly aggressive. Pritchard is always aggressive, and we talked about Derek White. He was very aggressive as well in a game in which he didn't shoot very well, still very aggressive, always an aggressive player. But I thought Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum did a nice job of setting that up early by themselves. And of course, they do take a combined 45, 44 shots tonight between the two of them. Jaylen Brown comes out with 21 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals on 9 of 19, 2 of 7. Jaylen Brown, a couple of struggles from 3 as of late. This stretch he's been struggling quite a bit from 3. And Franco, I just want to ask about Jaylen Brown. Does someone need to be in his ear about shot selection on some of these 3-point attempts? Now, we know Jaylen Brown can be a good spot up 3-point shooter, a good catch and 3 shooter, but some of these attempts in which he's shooting it early in the shot clock, he's sidestepping guys off the dribble, contested, when the Celtics can maybe run something more in the half court. Those opportunities, they're more abundant than they need to be. Do you think Jaylen Brown here moving into the future, some of his shot selection maybe needs a tweak?
I think, yeah, I think his shot selection needs a tweak, but the way he's getting to his shots is the real issue. when he's setting up, trying to make his own isolation scores, that's when turnovers are created. Like, sometimes you just got to face the music and realize that Jason Tatum's the isolation scorer on this team. And when Jaylen Brown is doing his off the ball work, that's when he's at his most efficient. When he's slashing to the paint, catching lobs, finishing on backdoor slides from standing in the corner, or even getting a kick out if he doesn't decide to cut in. I mean, I really have a lot of faith in him as a scorer. I do not mind him putting up 20 shots in a game, and he will have blips that he is going to have 30 to 40 point games when he's having those types of nights. And who knows, if he has the hot hand, maybe Jason Tatum will let him take more of the reign on a night. But it's just being able to find that balance between the two. And when Jason Tatum is having those turnovers, he has to feel comfortable in kicking it out to the person next to him. And that's honestly where I feel it's really important to get the players around them to acclimated with what they want to do. I mean, Banton and White are going to have no problems being the third or fourth option scoring. Same with a Kada down low or a Cornet. If you have those three players on the court with those two, they should be able to create something for themselves and create an offensive look. Because when, not to say this, when all six of the key players for the Celtics, Holiday and Porzingis, are back, it shouldn't feel like, okay, it's your turn to score and then we'll just go back and forth. It should just be A, B, C, or D, and not whose night is it. It's more of who's got the best shot opportunity at this very second.
Yeah, we'll see how this develops for the Celtics moving forward because I believe 2 years ago we saw, unfortunately, with Ime Udoka, he needed to kind of sort that structure out with the Celtics between Brown, Tatum, and then the rest of the team. And we did see a couple of problems the season before, and then coming into 2021, 2022, in which persisted to the point in which needed to be addressed before the Celtics could go out and actually be a winning basketball team. And what worries me just a little bit here is you do see a couple of those same trends happen with the Celtics every now and then. It's it doesn't feel as organized within the structure game to game, night to night. Now, tonight you can easily look at the shot chart and go, okay, well, guys took the necessary shots in which you want them to take because Tatum took 25, Brown took 19. You want Jason Tatum to take more shots than Jaylen Brown at the end of the day, or you want them to be somewhat close to each other. And even in this game, although they ended with similar shots, they were pretty well even for most of the night. At one point, they were both 6 of 12, and I believe that was at halftime. So they were 12 of 24 at half between the two of them. And then you see Jason Tatum, and we kind of took off compared to Jaylen Brown. Now, neither of them saw a boisterous second half performance. However, Jason Tatum ended with 34, Jaylen Brown ended with 21. And Brown's shooting in the second half was 2 of 7, and Jason Tatum, I believe he was what 5 of 13 in the second half. So I kind of feel a little bit between the two of them that sometimes it's a my turn, your turn type of thing, and it's not as cohesive as it should be all the time. That's not to say that they can't sort some of those issues out because we do see the moments in which there is a lot of cohesion between the two and they're getting the necessary opportunities and looks that both fit their game in certain moments in which, okay, Jason Tatum's hot, you go. Jaylen Brown's hot, you go. And it's it's not as herky jerky as we see in some of these games where, or in some of these moments rather, say in Orlando the other day, and then tonight, particularly in the third quarter, where another team is making a run and it just feels like there's no cohesion whatsoever. You want to see more cohesion, like we see in the moments where they make their runs and can sustain these games, particularly in the first quarters. We see first quarters, they always look great. They always come out to hot starts. And now it's just about keeping the lead. But in those moments of adversity, it's very my turn, your turn. And there's not that rhythm that exists when they're actually clicking with each other. And I think that can be sorted out in time, but we'll just see, how much time it does take to sort out, if ever, of course, under Joe Mazzulla. But Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum for tonight's performance, I thought they were solid. You want to see less turnovers out of Tatum for sure, and you want to see Jaylen Brown shoot the ball better from three and maybe take a couple of shots from different locations. But you can't complain too much when they combine for 55 points of the Celtics 113 and do ultimately pull out the win. But other guys I want to talk about for this game, some of the bench guys. I think some of the bench guys individually speaking, I think they're good. I think they can fit into certain lineups and be effective. However, I think some of these guys collectively together as lineups are not making too much sense to the point in which it's kind of a detriment to the Celtics. But what do you see out of the bench so far for the Celtics, and what did you see out of them tonight in a game where they had to play with Porzingis and Holiday out?
I really like the other guys that were brought in during this offseason, and I would love to see a lot more of them. I mean, Banton starting tonight is a clear-cut sign that they're looking to add a little bit more diversity and versatility into their lineup. And Banton being a 6'8" point guard, he looked like he flowed very well out there with Derek White, and it's just because of his off-ball movement. It's kind of what I want to see Jaylen Brown do a little bit more of, is be that downhill threat, and then if the downhill isn't there, kick it out and make a smart playmaking play. And also his work on the defensive end was huge. Sam Hauser played well tonight. Shot, what was his shooting blip tonight? He was 4 for 9, so just below 50% from three-pointer. And Peyton Pritchard, once again, not as consistent as we've been hoping him to be. Yes, he has those big shots, those end of the countdown buzzer beater or shot clock buzzers. He's he's a very good energy pill player for this team. But as a 20-minute a game performer, I would love to see those minutes sprinkled around a little bit more to O'Shea Brissett and a Delano Banton, maybe splitting the minutes up between them behind Derek White and Jrue Holiday. But other than that, I think that they all bring something very specific to the team and their own aspect that can get gelled together into some really, really cool lineups and rosters that I can't wait to see if Joe Mazzulla can make those happen. And I feel like that will help them avoid those third quarter blips when, let's per se, you pull the starters after they get up to a 20-point lead. After that, it seems like it just rolls down the hill from there. But if these guys can come in and keep that same energy that the starters played, we can afford to rest our players and not have them playing 40 minutes in game 17 of the regular season. We could have them more well rested, playing around 35, 33. And the other players off the bench have 15 to 20, and we still have enough in the tank for the next games.
Yes, to me, the bench, personally, I kind of mentioned it when we were starting this segment that the bench individually next to the starters, right? The top 6 guys. And I'm not even, Al Horford is sort of included in this conversation. He's a sort of bench guy, sort of starter, because on a night like tonight, he's a starter, and it's not like it's a bench guy starting. It's not like our 6th man starting. It just feels like Al Horford is starting. And the top 6 guys, when you mesh in who we have off the bench with the top 6, it looks all right. It really does. We do have Ben. We do have O'Shea, Brissett, Pritchard, Hauser, Horford are our main guys off the bench. You do have Cornette, and not sure what happened to my guy Franco here, but we're going solo right now. You do have Cornette off the bench, and ultimately, you just look at the entirety of those guys being meshed in with the starting lineup, and Franco does join us back here real quick. There we go. Welcome back. But the bench, and the lineup off the bench, they mesh well with the starters, the top 6. So the top 6: Brown, Tatum, Horford, Porzingis, Holiday, Derek White. The rest of the guys: Pritchard, Ben, Brissett, um,
Hauser.
Hauser, Horford, and Cornette. Or sorry, don't include Horford, and you could throw in Kata in there as well because he's actually receiving minutes now. But all of those guys, collectively as a unit, when 3/5 of the lineup is made up of the secondary guys in which I mentioned, so Brissett, Ben, Pritchard, Hauser, Kata, Cornette, those guys. When
Stevens,
3/5 of the
Mikhailuk. They have so many of them.
Mikhailuk, all of these names, when a lineup is 3/5 of these names, you see the dips. You see the dips. We'll go back to the lead tracker real quick to see the dips. The dips in which we see in this lead tracker, those are the moments in which the lineup is predominantly bench. And you see the times in which the lead goes up for the Celtics. Early in the first quarter, the lead goes up. Who's in? Starters. When do we typically take out our starters? When does Joe Mazzulla typically take out the starters? Midway through the first. What do you see? The lead go down. They're reinserted. Lead goes back up. They're taken out again. Lead goes down. They're put in all the way up until halftime. They're given a rest at halftime. They come out at halftime, the starters, that is. They reestablish that lead. And that's what's so important coming out of half, is that coming out of half at the NBA, in the NBA, it's typically starting lineup versus starting lineup. And that's when you really want to see your starting lineup put points on the board. Tonight, the Celtics were able to do that. Bench unit comes into play. 6-point game. So I do see a little bit of a problem in regards to the Celtics moving forward because of their availability. We clearly have a couple of players who are hindered via injury right now. Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday, and a lot of these guys off the bench are going to need to step up. And I think individually with the top 6 players, they mesh well. However, when you take out 2 of the top 6, leave them with 4, right? It creates a scenario in which you have to create lineups made up 3/5, 4/5, maybe even all 5 guys off the bench. And in that scenario, the Celtics, they are struggling. They are straight up struggling in those scenarios when most of their lineup is made up of bench guys. And it doesn't necessarily seem, and I don't have the numbers on this, and I'm sure that it probably does impact, these players do have an impact. But from an out, just from an eyes perspective, right? It doesn't seem like no matter which starter you pair with them, Tatum, Brown, White, some of these guys aren't ball handlers like Porzingis, Horford. They're not ball handlers. Say Tatum, Brown, White, and Holiday. If you put them with the bench unit, now of course Holiday, Porzingis, they're out. But if you put them with the bench unit, it doesn't seem to matter, who's out there. This team kind of struggles when the bench guys are out there in majority. However, when we see majority starters or majority top six of the players are making up the lineup, and you have one or two bench guys in there, it can work. A Hauser in there works, Cornette in there works, Pritchard in there works. But when you make 3/5 of the lineup, Hauser, Pritchard, Cornette, those are the moments in which the Celtics get very, very shaky. Very, very shaky, it seems. And it happened again tonight. And we'll see how it continues to happen moving forward, because the Celtics are going to have to weather the storm without Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday for the foreseeable future. Now, I put up earlier on my page that the Celtics, now I will say they improved the record tonight. They improved the record. They were 2-3, 2-3 on the season when one of their top six players, one or more, were missing, right? So Derek White, Al Horford, they've all missed games. Jaylen Brown missed a game as well simultaneously alongside Al Horford or Derek White. I can't remember which one. But when the Celtics are missing one, if not more, of their top six players, they're 2-3. And that means in their other games this season, when they were 12-4 coming into tonight, those 11 other games in which they were fully healthy with their top six players, they were 10-1. 10-1. And we've seen in those games, like I'm talking about, the bench unit mesh in with the starters very well. However, in the games in which they're 2-3, I will say all 5 of those games came on the road, and tonight was the first home game of that entire stretch right there. They're now 3-3 without one or more of their top six players. The Celtics are this, so they did improve that record and played a home game under those circumstances for the first time this season tonight. But the Celtics, we've seen their problems without some of the top six players, and we see here on the bottom of the screen, Kristaps Porzingis. Calf tightness. We talked about this a little bit last post game, how this could maybe be a little bit more serious. Maybe the team knew about it. Maybe Kristaps Porzingis knew about it last week. Didn't show up on the injury report. Plays in Orlando. Plays through the injury. Can't play through the injury, and all of a sudden, he's now out for a week. And the Celtics, we now know under these circumstances tonight, they're going to have to weather the storm under the veil of not having one, if not more, of their top six players. As we see here, too, Drew Holiday, he's out as well. He did not play tonight with a sprained ankle. His timetable is up in the air along with Porzingis's. But what do you think the Celtics need to do in this next period to weather this storm without these two players, Holiday and Porzingis, the huge offseason acquisitions? This is basically what the team would look like right now with Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, and, well, they would have Malcolm Brogdon if they didn't trade him away. But considering all those guys are hurt, our guys are hurt as well, too. What do the Celtics need to do to weather the storm moving forward?
Just start to really work these guys in. The bottom of the bench guys, Brissett and Stevens, we do not see enough of. And I would love to, like, it seems like when they put together this roster, the wings that they grabbed all have a matching niche to them, or archetype, if you will. You have the slashing playmakers, energy players in Stevens and Brissett, who are usually behind Brown, and then you have scorers and shooters who usually coincide with Tatum, and those are Mikhailou and Hauser. I think it's really important to get these players worked in, because they are coming off of last year when they were playing in Cleveland or Charlotte. They were all starting players and key rotation players. So it's not that I don't think they can't contribute. However, the season doesn't get shorter, nor do the injuries get sweeter. I think if you don't figure it out now, you're going to need to really assess the team, and it's going to be hard to even add to the team from that point because we're so far over the tax apron. But it's just find out now what these players are capable of and have them work in over players like Hauser and Pritchard who have been on this team for 2 to 3 years. We know what they are capable of, and what they bring to the table is pretty inconsistent work and a couple of good hot nights. However, Hauser has become our main scorer or 3-point shooter off the bench. But there's times that Hauser's even taking shots that he has no business taking when he's on the move in the last seconds of games, or it's just not a set up shot for him. So I just think this team really has to start to understand what they have on the bench, and because from as far as it looks like, it seems like they're playing the comfort game and only keeping what they know out there.
Yeah, going into the future, I don't believe any injury is good for players or teams. Let me make that clear. I don't believe injuries are good for players or teams. They're never good. That said, can silver linings come out of a player being injured? Yes. Particularly from a team's perspective, a team can get to know their players a lot better and what they have within their players. A coach and a coaching staff can get to know a lot better what they have within their players when key players are injured. Because we do see, like tonight, Delano Banton, he receives the start tonight against the Atlanta Hawks. It was kind of a little bit of a question who would start tonight. I mean, not kind of a little bit. It was undoubtedly a big question who would start tonight. You look at the bench: Pritchard, Hauser, Cornette, Cada, White, Brown, Tatum, Horford. Those are the 4 of your top 6 still available to you. And I will say, moving into the future, Holiday and Porzingis, we have no idea how long these players are going to be out. And who is going to be that 5th starter is a very big question right now. And to get to insert those guys into the lineup, if you're Joe Mazzulla, in the absence of Porzingis and Holiday, that has to be a little bit of a blessing in disguise for the fact of Banton and a guy like Brissett who didn't even play tonight, which, come on now, I think we can play Brissett a little bit more. We saw how much we were killing Atlanta with those cuts. Brissett is a good cutter. We should have had him in there tonight, in my honest opinion, just saying. But you see some of these guys off the bench, they're receiving more of an opportunity. Some of the lineups in which are out there, you do have to use the bench and utilize the bench a lot more than they've had to this season. And I said earlier that we've seen a lot of just bad results from some of the bench units, but you would like to see some growth out of the lineups. And you're of course at the same time getting to know what you're getting out of some of these players coming off the bench. Hauser played 31 minutes tonight. I mean, how many times have we seen Hauser play 31 minutes? He's usually a 20-minute per game type of guy. And I think what's underrated too about the NBA, some of these guys, they might be 20-minute per game guys or 15-minute per game guys or 30. You might not say when you go and play 30 minutes at minute 25, 26, 27, you're not used to that kind of stuff. that's a much different player at player 30 than he is at player at 20 minutes per game.
Oh,
So
definitely.
you get to find out stuff like that if you're a head coach, and just what kind of lineups you can mix and match, and what kind of guys can mesh into more lineups than others. And that is, I will say, the silver lining in the Porzingis and Holiday injuries is the fact the Celtics will, for, hopefully, hopefully, no, we didn't see Brissett tonight, but hopefully get to experiment a lot more than they would with some of these other lineups. And like you said, they do, I shouldn't say they, but Joe Mazzulla and the coaching staff, they tend to know, or they tend to lean more towards the lineups in which they know, rather than maybe experimenting with some of the end of bench guys, in which we wanted to see this whole season really, along some of the other starters in the lineup, because of some of the potential we do have off the bench. I would say it's much more significant than some people may think. But all in all, the bench and the opportunity for the bench and Joe Mazzulla for the whole roster, and the circumstances in which meet them, it will be interesting moving forward to see how exactly everything is structured. Because tonight, I don't think tonight, I wouldn't say this is going to be a consistent lineup structure we saw tonight. Banton played 18 minutes. Peyton Pritchard played only 20 minutes. I think we're going to eventually see a game. If Holiday continues to be out, I believe we're going to see a game in which Pritchard plays 25 or above. Um, Kata played 15 minutes tonight. Maybe on another night, those go more towards Cornette. He only played 9 minutes. And then Derek White played 37. Jason Tatum played 38. Brown 36. Those are a lot of minutes for regular season games.
Yeah.
And there was another player. Oh, yeah, Sam Hauser. He played 31 minutes tonight. I kind of mentioned that one earlier. But I believe we'll see this minutes distribution play out a little bit differently as time moves on, especially if Porzingis and Holiday continue to be out of the lineup. But from the Celtics' perspective, uh, just it's going to be a I don't want to say it's going to be a rough period, because we've seen this team right now. They're 13-4. They've been all right outside of this past week, but moving ahead, they're certainly in waters right now where they're really going to have to steer the ship more than just go out and gain chemistry, gain cohesion. They're going to have to figure it out on most nights with a lot of these lineups, more often than not. But moving ahead, looking ahead on the Celtics schedule, the Celtics do have an in-season tournament game next on Tuesday night against the Chicago Bulls. And going into that game, the Celtics, they kind of they need to whoop the Bulls. I mean,
Whoop them.
they
Like
need to
20
absolutely whoop them.
plus.
They need to absolutely whoop the Bulls, because let's set it up for the folks at home here as I mess around with these on the these graphics, and the mouse is going nuts again over here as you all. Okay, these are all going to be bloopers at the end of the year, but let's set up this scenario for everybody on this post game show and what happened to the Celtics the other day in Orlando, because I don't think everybody is necessarily aware of the fact the Celtics completely blew the in-season tournament the other night in Orlando against the Magic. Going into that game, the Celtics, on a golden platter in front of them, had East Group C right there to win. They had it right there to win in Orlando. All they had to do was beat the Magic, and you didn't have to do it handily. You didn't have to do anything fancy. Just beat the Orlando Magic, and give the Orlando Magic credit for being as great of a team as they are this year, and having so much depth, and really just outplaying the Celtics the entirety of the second half, and, well, really the entirety of the game after the first quarter. But the Celtics, they could have won the group. They could have advanced to the bracket and could have been one of the four teams in which are playing in the Eastern Conference for a chance to go and play in Vegas in the semifinals, and then the in-season tournament finals. However, the Boston Celtics completely blow that game and now put themselves in a scenario where they can still win the group. But in order for that to happen, they need the Brooklyn Nets, number one, to win against the Toronto Raptors. They need the Brooklyn Nets to win. So you already need a team to win. You don't control your own destiny if you're the Celtics anymore. You need the Brooklyn Nets to win. And not only that, the Orlando Magic are a plus 23 in point differential right now. The Celtics are a zero, right? A zero. And the Celtics essentially just need to whoop the Chicago Bulls. They need to beat them by more than 23 points. And I believe there's a caveat somewhere listed in there that if Brooklyn Brooklyn can't win by more than a certain amount as well. I would have to check that. But essentially, we have to whoop the Chicago Bulls. The Nets have to win as well. And if that doesn't happen in that exact scenario, we have to win off of point differential to receive the last East wild card spot. And I don't have the standings up in front of me right now. However, I'm quite certain with our plus 0 point differential at this moment in time, we are not at the top of the wild card standings. In fact, I believe there are 4 or 5 teams ahead of us via record right now. And just all of the reasons I'm listing, what the Celtics need to go through to even get into the bracket, just to win the tournament. Forget the tournament win, just to get into the bracket, it doesn't seem like it's happening, and it's all because of this loss in Orlando the other night. But now going into this in-season tournament game against the Bulls, do you personally believe, Franco, that the team is going to show up in this game? Now, I will say this: it's still a regular season game, still important, still means something. But do you think the same amount of hype will surround this game as it did the last 3 in-season tournament games? Because for me personally, I think the Bulls, I think the Celtics, of course, they're playing a real game still, but they're not. This is not necessarily. They're not necessarily playing for anything anymore.
What this in-season tournament was made for wasn't made for teams like the Boston Celtics or fan bases like us who have been blessed with championship runs year after year. And I kind of feel like the loss to Orlando was a wake-up call because the Orlando Magic this is probably number one thing on their whiteboard. We need to win this in-season tournament. Likewise with teams like Toronto or any team that is kind of looking to get a play-in opportunity at the end of the season. This is their championship. So I think the Celtics really are going to value this because they want to have that per se dominant run. And it kind of sucks, but it's better to get the feeling of losing into their skin now in the in-season tournament than in the playoffs this year. But it's just gonna leave a sour taste in their mouths until next year, and I hope it just fuels them more because now look what they have to do. On a night you guys could have easily just relaxed. We could have had the starters play 30 minutes against the Chicago Bulls in an in-season tournament. That would have been what, as the Chicago is looking pretty rough right now, that would be considered a layup game. But now it becomes a serious game where you are personally trying to put as many points on the board as possible against the team. And even if you do succeed in that, it's not guaranteed that's going to happen for you, which is kind of like that's what happens when you don't take every game as seriously as you need to.
Yeah, to me, this in-season tournament just adds so many wrinkles into the NBA schedule and the landscape. Now, I think deep down the players may not. I don't want to say may not believe in the tournament as much as we do, but I don't think there's as much hype around it as maybe we believe from a player's perspective. Uh, and even in this game, it seems like it's a game where it's like, well, it doesn't matter in terms of the in-season tournament, but it still matters for the regular season and ultimately the finals, because the finals, regular season record matters for your seeding for the playoffs later for the finals. So there is a connection there. However, it does feel like a weird approach to this game, because on one hand, you could approach it like we said, you could try to put up as many points as possible and try to spread the margin as wide as possible. Try to play like the Indiana Pacers for a game. Don't play any defense. Points, 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 points. Let's see how many points we can put up on the board against the Chicago Bulls in a small period of time. And Joe Mazzulla, we all know he has that goal of shooting 53s a game. Well, maybe in this game against the Chicago Bulls, why not shoot 60? Why not shoot 65? Let's just jack up 60% of our shots from three and not 50%. Let's jack up 60% of them from three. And that's what makes this game so weird is you could do that. You could have that approach to the game where you want to just absolutely blow out the Bulls, put as many points up on the board as possible in terms of margin, in terms of point, total points matters too. And that could be your goal, or it's just to play a regular season game. And I think more teams probably lean towards that than to actually care about the point differential. But that does make it, a little bit of an interesting dynamic that these games have those wrinkles into them where one team we saw the other night, DeMar DeRozan, in the in-season tournament, was complaining about the Toronto Raptors shooting at the end of the game when the game was already over. And ultimately, that mattered. I will say it didn't necessarily matter because both teams were out. So I can kind of understand that a little bit. But it does matter in the in season tournament that you do create that point differential. You do put up points on the board. And DeMar DeRozan and the Bulls, they weren't exactly feeling it. They weren't exactly, you know, viewing that as respect to the game. And then the Toronto Raptors, on the other hand, are playing for the in season tournament.
Oh,
Kind of
wait until
similar to this game.
Yeah, wait until DeRozan sees what we do to him.
Yeah, well, to me, DeMar DeRozan's always been a Celtic killer, but
Yeah, no,
I
well,
could go off on a
I'm
tangent
just
about DeMar
saying
DeRozan.
if we're up by a lot, if he's gonna get real pissed if we start trying to get up by more than 20 at the
Well,
end of the
that's
game.
you even like you set up this scenario. You just set up this scenario with that statement. If we're up by 25 points, right? Say we're up by 25, miraculously, right? Late in the fourth quarter, 6 minutes left, we're up 25. Do we keep the starters in?
Do you know this? If they do not make this in-season tournament, does that mean that they have from December 2nd to December 10th or 12th, whenever their next game is after the tournament's over, off?
Okay, so let me clear this up for whoever is listening in here now and whoever will listen later, or whoever's listened before if they come back and view this. The in season tournament on the schedule, now I had to tweak my post a little bit earlier because originally on the post it said the Celtics will not play a game on the road until December 19th. And I had to go back and tweak it and write may not, because right now the Celtics and every other team actually have two unscheduled games on their schedules. Two. And of course, the championship game to the in season tournament does not count towards a regular season game for either team who makes it. So each team, even if you make the bracket or not, will play an additional two games to the in season tournament. And the Celtics will play the 6th and the 8th of December. If they do not make the bracket, if they do not, there's still a chance. There's still a chance. There's still a chance. But if they don't make the bracket, the Celtics don't make the bracket, they will play the 6th and the 8th of December, and the NBA will schedule those games based upon who's available to play, who's on each team's schedules. And I believe in those games we could potentially see us go on the road twice because of how many home games we have in a row. But the Celtics will play 2 games in between December 1st and December 12th when they face, I believe, Cleveland and Philly might be those 2 dates. I'm not quite sure. But the Celtics will play 2 games. The teams who make the tournaments play the tournament will play 2 games as well, and the championship game will not matter. So in regards to that, that's what the Celtics schedule looks like moving forward. I'm very interested to see where will be scheduled those 2 days and who, because that does change up the, changes up the travel plan a little bit. Like if we get a home game on that front end, that's probably better for our guys who are out tonight. So we'll see.
Yeah. Imagine if we have to go on the road to I don't know, San Francisco and have to fly out into the complete West Coast randomly just because of that tournament.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, it could be a Western Conference team.
Yeah, really I thought when I saw the schedule, I thought that that was just that hiatus was if you didn't make that championship, you just got to kick your feet up for 8 days. Which I honestly, if I were the Celtics, if that was the case, I would consider just losing and being able to take that 8-day break. But now that I know that, they're gonna definitely try to win this.
Yeah, that would have been an interesting little caveat to the in-season tournament if they didn't have all those teams play in between, because I definitely believe you would have teams wanting to rest, and that would pretty much just extinguish any of what the
free week off, yeah,
competitiveness.
Free week off or playing an in-season tournament. I feel like a lot of players would choose the free week off.
But I still think, too, there might be some incentive as well for the fact of, well, we don't have to play in intense games. Teams don't have to play in intense games during that week. They play 2 regular season games. Well, those two games aren't going to be against the Lakers or the Suns. Whoever makes the bracket supposedly will be good teams. The Pacers, we won't have to play the Pacers. They're in the bracket. So those 2 games, already you're knocking out top opponents, presumably with the bracket. You don't have to play top opponents. And then subsequently, those games aren't going to be in Vegas. They're not going to be in front of national audiences. They're going to be in front of our local markets, most likely. And those games are just not going to be as intense. Whereas if you're playing in Vegas, that's a lot more wear and tear. Now, it's a double-edged sword on this side where you could say, oh, well, guys are putting more wear and tear on their body versus potentially, say, teams like OKC and Indiana who don't have as much experience in intense games. They're gaining all this experience in these intense games. They might actually want that experience for their team rather than, say, the Clippers or the Celtics or the Warriors who have been there before, the Bucks who have been there before, the Miami Heat who have been there before. They know what intense games feel like. They're good in that department of experience. They want the rest because they know what the real road looks like moving ahead. So it kind of, balances out. And that's why this in-season tournament is so interesting, is the fact a lot of these young teams, they're the teams wanting to gain experiences, wanting to win the tournament. They never won anything in their lives. A lot of these teams, too, a lot of the younger teams are not as paid as some of the veteran teams. Some of those guys are on number three in contracts, in terms of their contract number. They have their rookie year, and they might sign a deal, and they might sign another deal. They might be on their 3rd contract, whereas these rookies, $500K to some guys on our roster straight up are barely making over $500K, I'm sure, with fees and agents and whatnot. So it is a bigger thing for these young teams.
Yeah, I think the pay cut on our roster from the fifth most player to the sixth most paid player is like a $6 million difference. So it honestly makes sense that these teams are going for it. And like I said, these smaller market teams who haven't seen a NBA championship or a banner hoisted can lift a banner this year. So that might be a really cool thought for a lot of these teams.
That is actually another thought in general, though. Are teams going to lift a banner for the in-season tournament?
I would. I mean, not actually in TD Garden, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe TD Garden just because we're spoiled.
Like, we don't. I remember that comment from Rondo years ago about, him and Isaiah Thomas were having a little bit of a difference playing each other on different teams away from Boston. But he had the comment of, oh, well, we don't hang conference championship banners in Boston. Boston doesn't hang conference championship banners. Well, in-season tournament banner feels a little bit like it's a lesser trophy than a conference championship trophy. So to me, if we're not hanging conference championships,
well, it's the
why
first
hang
one,
in-season
so
tournament? But it's a thing. It's a trophy. It's a presentation. I feel like the NBA would want a banner hung for it, right?
yeah, like in like a court like in Sacramento or Indiana, they would absolutely kill for that. Hell, they might even throw a parade for it.
Definitely. We're getting pretty close on our time here, and I know we moved on to kind of the next game in the in-season tournament and whatnot. And I don't want to bring up this next topic necessarily in regards to the game that we just saw, but I do think this player. I wanted to ask about this player in particular, Trae Young tonight. That's not Trae Young. That's Derek White. Also, hey, look, guys, 11 assists right down here. Derek White, 11 assists right there.
I swear he did. He's not
For
lying.
those who didn't watch earlier in the show, we definitely had this earlier, and it was up correctly. 11 assists. Yes, right here on the bottom. But Trae Young, right here, the guy I wanted to bring up. A lot of people throwing some stuff on his name this season, but I feel like he's always a feared player when he comes to Boston. It feels like he's always torching us. Now, I know he was only 12 of 27, 6 of 16 from 3 tonight, but I felt his presence again in Boston. And do you consider Trae Young amongst some of the, I don't know, because I feel like his reputation has been somewhat diminished amongst a lot of NBA media and a lot of people. Do you still believe Trae Young potentially is a top 20, top 15 NBA player still? Or I don't want to say still, maybe he was never, but do you believe he's in that category?
Yeah, and we say that he only shot 12 of 27 tonight. Jason Tatum shot 11 for 25. So they're both in the same shooting range, and that in Atlanta, I'm not an Atlanta fan, but that's Trae Young's team, and I would think that DeJounte Murray is that tandem-esque player like a Jaylen Brown. So, yeah, they're not at the same they're not the same skill level per se, but I think Trae Young is more than capable of being a star player in this league, an all-star, not putting him within any debate for MVP candidacy unless we see a dramatic shift in Atlanta. They start winning games and that whole crew starts to click around him. But I think that Trae Young will prosper extremely well if Atlanta really puts the pieces around him to succeed, or if he just moves on elsewhere. But I don't think he is as much of a poison on offense to a team, live by the ball, die by the ball, like a James Harden-esque. But yeah, I feel as if Trae Young has a reason to be feared as that villain and as a respected top 20 player.
Yeah, really the reason I wanted to bring him up here is the fact I believe he's amongst an elite level of NBA players. Now, we can question defensively what he brings to the table. It's always going to be a question, just like we talk about with Peyton Pritchard. It's the same for all of these guys who are 6 foot, 6'1". It's the size. It's the size. It's always going to be the size. And they're not magically overnight going to grow to 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", and with amazing wingspans to defend multiple positions. But offensively, Trae Young in particular, I think he does bring an offensive talent to the game that is on par with, I don't want to say all time greats, but he can be somebody in this generation in which we look back and go, that player was absolutely cold. That player was absolutely cold. And I understand, yes, some of the shooting numbers tonight may not look the most gaudy, but and this season as well, I may mention for Trae Young that he has been struggling from the field a little bit this season. But every time he comes through Boston, every time, it's not just the shooting, it's the passing, it's the playmaking from Trae Young. He's such a high IQ offensive player. And in that game the other night against the Indiana Pacers, in which the Atlanta Hawks unfortunately lost 157 to 152, the highest scoring game we've seen since 1998. The Pacers received a lot of praise for winning that game. They did. Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield. I love that team. I love the Pacers. Don't get me wrong. But the Hawks, they were kind of left aside as if, oh my goodness, you gave up 157. Oh my goodness. The Pacers, oh, they scored 157. Well, they gave up 152, and who scored 152? The Atlanta Hawks. Now, the unfortunate part is the Atlanta Hawks came away with 86 first half points, completely blew a lead in that game, and lost, giving up 157. But they themselves scored 152, and for all the offensive praise in which Indiana received, I didn't understand why Atlanta didn't receive a little bit of the same, even though Atlanta's defense and Indiana's defense, both defenses were absolutely atrocious that game. I mean, they weren't even trying. It was just high court press, and we're not even defending the rim, whatever, and we're running the other way every time we get the ball. I didn't understand why Atlanta did. I don't understand why they didn't receive more praise for scoring 152 and Trae Young having a great night that he did the other night, and then coming into tonight into Boston, 7 assists, 33 points. And I know the shooting isn't all that efficient, but you did feel his presence for a lot of this game. And during the runs of these games, this game tonight, Trae Young, he was kind of the forefront of them. And I do believe in this soon to be NBA future in which is developing in front of our eyes currently this season. I think Trae Young is going to be a big part of the NBA and already is. It's just some of the team structure. He needs defenders around him. He needs guys to mask that. The Hawks, they don't have guys who mask his inabilities. And offensively, you do have a lot of guys on the Hawks who can be uplifted by Trae Young, and Trae Young can lift his game off of others as well. But to make that entire team work, they need different players than they have right now. However, I do think Trae Young, I think he's their center. He's their core piece. He's such a talented offensive player. I cannot say enough good things about Trae Young offensively. But that pretty much wraps up tonight's game between the Celtics and the Hawks. From our discussional standpoint, this, I believe, just this game broke a record. This post game broke a record for longest post game ever. Now, we set a record actually the other night, 112. We're going 124 for Kobe, even though there's no way that we're ending this in the next minute, because that's just how these shows go. I'm sure we'll go a little bit longer, but as the show comes to a close, I've been talking forever now. I have to let you talk, Franco, because I don't know. I feel like I should
Battery's getting
talk a
low.
little more. But any last thoughts on tonight's game? I talked a lot about Trae Young, maybe Trae Young, or just the Celtics in general.
Yeah, I mean about Trae Young in that 150-point game. The what the Pacers just make me have a weird feeling about them. They make me raise an eyebrow. They have the talent on that team, but I've just seen them against the Celtics earlier this year give up 150 around 140 points to us. I mean, I feel like a lot of teams who are trying to build up to where the Celtics are and trying to compete with the higher tiered teams, the 1 and 2s, the us in the Milwaukee Bucks. They are trying to win in a more scoring fashion than a defensive fashion, and teams like the Atlanta Hawks, New York Knicks, I just feel like those types of teams are what are going to be our challenges in the first and second rounds. But if I feel like those teams don't find a way to even out the defense and offensive balance, they won't be prepared to make any push against any of the top tier teams in the league.
I believe you're completely correct in that regard because, quite frankly, all these teams, for as spectacular as they look on one side or the other, if you don't have a well-rounded roster or a well-rounded style of play or a philosophical plan, how you play and believe in that plan, from a well-rounded perspective too, because I shouldn't even mention that because other teams do have a well-rounded plan, like Indiana. We don't play any defense at all. That being said, if you don't really have everything right, if you're lacking, say Indiana defensively, they don't play any defense. I mean Atlanta, they don't play any defense. New York, they fail to run in transition a lot, but those other two teams do. When you're really bought into one style of play and you're completely ignoring one side of basketball or just a couple of aspects of how to play in certain areas, typically in the playoffs, those kind of flaws are shown. And I believe teams like the Hawks and the Pacers, for as offensively talented as they are, when they get into a half court setting in the playoffs and can't play in transition constantly and can't defend anybody in the half court and then now have to play a style of play in which they're not comfortable with, all of a sudden that becomes something they can't overcome. Whereas the Celtics, if they can play both ways, if the Sixers, if they can play both ways, the Bucks, they can play both ways. Say now with Damian Lillard in the lineup, they have way more ability to play both ways than they used to offensively. Those type of teams, they're more well-rounded, and overall, they're likely not to show as many flaws throughout a game as some of these other teams do on a night-to-night basis. But the Celtics, they play one of these, I don't want to say lesser, but maybe lesser Eastern Conference teams,
I
maybe
wish the Bulls were
flawed Eastern
good.
Conference teams tonight. What was that?
I thought we were talking about the Bull, getting over to the Bulls, but the Hawks. But yeah, next we have the Bulls, which are one of those teams I thought were gonna be making that middle of the pack push before the season started. The loss of Lonzo Ball hurts them a lot before anything begins, and I'm kind of sad that team fizzled out before it could even begin.
Honestly, they have that 27-13 record to look at, and all of their fans look at that and don't have too much else on top of that. After that 27-13 start, where they achieved the first seed in the Eastern Conference in a year in which we made the finals, the Boston Celtics, we were the 11th seed at the same time. They were 27 and 13. That was the same time we were hovering around 500, 2 games, 3 games under 500. We couldn't seem to win games consistently. We come out with the 2 seed. They completely fall apart, lose Alex Caruso, lose Lonzo Ball for now 2 years, all the way to the point in which we now play them Tuesday after coming off this win against the Atlanta Hawks. We play the Chicago Bulls Tuesday, and their record is not very good. I will say that going into Tuesday, and that will be an in-season tournament game. We will have your coverage here. Not really sure who's going to be on the Tuesday game quite yet, but an array of us will be here for Celtics versus Bulls and potentially the Celtics' last in-season tournament game until next year. Next year, Franco, next year. The Celtics may not be playing another in-season tournament game after Tuesday, but like I said, we will have your coverage here, and like tonight, the Celtics defeating the Atlanta Hawks 113-103. I'm your host, Seamus Zarlingo, also known as Celtics Every Day. Let's get it right this time. Let's not pull a Rob. Right here next to me, Franco. We enjoyed having you, and I hope you guys enjoyed listening. And as we always say, signing off, go Celtics.